Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. A wet day in London. I was at Lord's to watch the cricket. Not a ball was bowled. Big disappointment. Not much action there. But I tell you where there has been some action. The Boris burqa row. It is escalating today. Today, 100 British Muslim women wrote a letter to Brandon Lewis, the chairman of the Conservative Party, demanding that Boris Johnson be kicked out. They explained that whilst they accept that a majority of Muslim women do not wear the niqab or the burqa, they do because they believe it means they get closer to God. But there is, of course, a fair bit of debate over this, because interestingly, Taj Hargay of the Oxford Islamic Congregation wrote to the Times today saying there is no Quranic legitimacy for the burqa. And interestingly, we had other Muslim callers last night saying they don't like the burqa one little bit. However, part of the escalation is this letter has been received by the Conservative Party chairman. And not to be left out of proceedings, Metropolitan Police Commissioner Cressida Dick has been questioned about Boris's comments in an interview earlier today.
Some people have clearly found it offensive. I can also tell you that I spoke last night to my very experienced officers who deal with hate crime, and although we have not yet received any allegation of such a crime, I can tell you that my preliminary view, having spoken to them, is that what Mr Johnson said would not reach the bar for a criminal offence. He did not commit a criminal offence.
Well, there's a relief. I mean, what is the Metropolitan Police Commissioner doing saying, I know that many people have found this offensive? Is it her job to give an opinion? Is it her... I mean, doesn't she know herself, as the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, what constitutes a hate crime and what does not? And why did she have to refer to her colleagues on this issue, given that no complaints have been received? I have to say, I see her intervention today, her answers today, I think they are overtly political. But this is how building up against Boris Johnson. Now, not to be left out, Remainer-in-Chief and former Attorney General Dominic Grieve had this to say in response to Boris's chances of becoming the leader.
One thing's quite clear: if you were to become leader of the party, I, for one, wouldn't be in it, because I don't regard him as a fit and proper person to lead a political party, and certainly not the Conservative Party.
So it's all-out war within the Conservative Party. Dominic Grieve, the former Attorney General, would leave the Conservative Party if Boris Johnson became the leader. And all of this on the day when it's been formally announced that an independent panel has been set up following complaints received by the party to find out whether Boris has breached the Conservative Party's Code of Conduct. Now, the Code of Conduct process is strictly confidential. We don't know who is going to be appointed to that committee, but if they find against Mr Johnson, he could face suspension from the Conservative Party. He could, I'm not making this up, in extremis face expulsion from the Conservative Party. All of this, remember, for writing an article in the Daily Telegraph when he said that the Danes had just banned the burqa. He himself was not in favour of a burqa ban, but he did not like it, and he said women walked around looking like letterboxes or like bank robbers. My question to you is, what do the Tory party do next? Do you think, like 100 Muslim women, and clearly the implication from Dominic Grieve that basically they must suspend him or kick him out, or do you think the Tories couldn't survive without Boris Johnson, and that maybe they've already pushed this way, way further than they should, because their own membership won't support it, in which case, if you feel that way, text to 84850. Or maybe, do you think it's possible that Boris could find himself in another party, maybe even set up his own party? Let me know. You can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC, @LBC, and of course, watch us on Facebook, as I know many of you do, and please comment there too. What should the Tory party do next? For once, I have to say, I'm asking you, because I just don't know. I think they've gone too far already. I think Mrs May, as I discussed last night, has gone way too far, wading in here, demanding an apology. It was interesting, wasn't it? We had Jacob Rees-Mogg on last night saying he thought that was absolutely wrong. I think they've got themselves in one hell of a mess. I think the vast majority of Conservative supporters, donors, the people that knock on doors, deliver leaflets, will think the party has frankly lost its marbles over this. I personally hope Boris doesn't back down. He's on holiday. Now, we don't know where. We're told it's abroad. I'll bet he's in a sort of French chateau somewhere, in a location where nobody is going to find him. But it's interesting, he certainly hasn't apologised as yet. Let's go to Andrew in Sheffield. Andrew, good evening.
Good evening.
So, do you think, the Prime Minister getting involved, now a formal disciplinary panel, Dominic Grieve saying he'd lead the party, are the Tory party getting this right, Andrew?
I think they've shot themselves in the foot.
Do you?
Theresa May isn't known as Sharia May for nothing because she's done nothing.
I've never heard her called that, but anyway.
She's quite well known for it, but you could guarantee to get a response from her for criticising Islam. I don't know what's wrong with her, but I think she's trying to bring in an Islamic blasphemy law through the back door.
Do you really?
I do, yeah. She's already restricted rights on free speech, even criticising or saying the wrong thing about Islam. She's always praising it. She's always doing the Uriah Heep impression around Muslims. So I think Boris was almost guaranteed to get a response from her.
We are, Andrew, in a funny place with this because you can lampoon the Pope and the Catholic Church, and that's absolutely fine, as in my view it should be. You can lampoon the Archbishop of Canterbury, which I personally do on a regular basis because I think he's hopeless. But and again, it's absolutely fine. In a free society, you should be able to do that. But you are right, Andrew, about one thing, that criticising Islam too much is seen quite quickly to be a hate crime, and I do understand the point you're making, but they've gone as far as this. What do you think they should do next?
I think they should quietly drop it. I've noticed that all those that are really criticising Boris Johnson are Remainers, ardent Remainers. I mean, Brandon Lewis, I understand he's making preparations to go for the leadership because he sees himself as a Remainer leader.
Wouldn't that be somewhat delusions of grandeur? I mean,
it probably would, yeah, I fully agree, but then again, I think our current Houses of Parliament is just like a kindergarten at the moment. They're an embarrassment.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Andrew, I do know for certain, increasingly around the world, we are being thought of as a bit of a joke, I'm sorry to say. Andrew, I thank you for that call. Phil says, so, Dominic Grieve says, if Boris is elected as leader, he will walk away. Can't wait, says Phil. Clearly the view there of a Conservative Leaver and not a Conservative Remainer. Boris Johnson has caused incitement to religious hatred. When I was a cop, that was a crime. Not sure what the chief means, says Richard. Richard, has he really caused incitement to religious hatred? I don't think he has, but Richard, please call me on 0345 6060 973 and tell me why, as a former policeman, you think he has. I think the whole world's going mad here, but there we are. Justin is a new caller from Cardiff. Justin, welcome.
Hello, Nigel. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, but I'm sort of looking on with incredulity. I mean, maybe it's because it's August and it's sort of summer madness, but the extent to which this Boris burqa saga is escalating, I can scarcely believe it, Justin.
Well, I totally agree with you. I mean, the only thing that the Conservative Party en masse can do now is make sure, because they've already said they're going to be a disciplinary committee hearing, that it needs to be impartial. And by that, I'm not talking about loaded with people that owe money or owe favours to the head of the Conservative Party, which is known to hate Boris Johnson.
Justin, what do you think the head of the Conservative Party would really like to do with Boris Johnson? Do you But hang on, Justin. Hang on, Justin. They may not like him. They may say to themselves, and with some truth, that he didn't abide by collective cabinet responsibility, because he was very often, wasn't he, speaking out ahead of big performances by the Prime Minister. But Justin, whatever Boris's flaws and faults, he did a couple of times manage to win, you know, the mayoral race for London. Not an easy thing for a Conservative to do. Surely, Justin, they must be bright enough to see that he's worth votes to their party.
Looking at how they've handled everything since the Brexit referendum, I wouldn't bet a drink on that, my friend.
Interesting.
So the only way I could think of it is, I'm not slating Boris Johnson as the person, as the columnist, because I actually quite agree with pretty much everything he says. What I have noticed is that the Conservative Party en masse has felt that Boris Johnson, Jacob Rees-Mogg, is the thorns in the sides of them that they'd very much like to disappear.
And that's because, Justin, they believe in Brexit strongly, yeah?
Well, I would believe that Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg believe in Brexit. The Conservatives, well, go back to the referendum, which you forced us to help. Thank you, by the way.
Thank you.
And you just have a look at we have a Theresa May who only declared her allegiance as a Remainer on the 11th hour, and all of the people she's put in power have been ardent Remainers. Now they're going to chair a disciplinary committee against one of the rightly or wrongly Brexiteers. This is a foregone conclusion.
Right, OK, Justin, thank you. Justin thinks Boris is in big trouble. Stephanie sends a great tweet in. Had Cressida Dick been head of the Metropolitan Police in the 1980s, she would have started every Monday morning by reporting spitting image to her hate crime unit for an assessment. Stephanie, well done. In the 1980s, we were used to the concept that people had opinions, that people could cause offence, that people could be lampooned, ridiculed. And you know what? We used to call it democracy. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it's 7:15. Well, Boris certainly gets the juices going, doesn't he? People with very strong opinions here. I'm asking, given this escalation today in the Boris burqa crisis, what the Tory party ought to do next. Ian on Facebook is clear. Sack Boris. He's an embarrassment to the Tories in the UK. But Karen says, I want Boris to be PM. But let me tell you, he is already in hot water with the advisory board on business appointments, ACABA. You see, the rules are that when you've been a minister, and don't forget he was the Foreign Secretary up until just after the Chequers Accord, there is normally a minimum 3-month waiting period during which ministers should not take up outside appointments. That's generally the rule. How long did Boris leave it? 3 days. 3 days, and only 2 weeks later, on July the 26th, did he inform the committee that he'd taken up the appointment without first asking their advice. So they're not very happy with him. But then Boris is not really a great respecter of rules, is he? Now, Russ has a theory on this. He says, whether you agree or not with Boris's comments, the Tories had no choice. After spending months criticising Labour over not acting on anti-Semitism, had they not responded here, they would be heralded hypocrites. Russ, I understand the point you're making, and it maybe has been part of the motivation of the Tory party chairman to act the way that he has. The problem is, Russ, that 2/3 of Conservative Party members, very strongly do not believe that Boris's comments were racist. In fact, 2/3 of party members want the burqa banned. They have a much stronger view on this than Boris Johnson himself does. Let's get a Liz, a new caller from Whittam in Essex. Good evening, Liz.
Hello, Nigel.
So, I'm now getting people telling me, Liz, that it's a foregone conclusion, the committee will be stacked with people that don't like him, and that Boris could be suspended. Would that be a good thing for the Tory party?
No, not at all.
So what should they? So what should they do?
I think they should just drop the whole thing. I mean, if you can't say something without all this uproar, where do our politicians stand? If politicians can't speak the truth, then what have the normal people got? They've got no chance.
Well, I mean, yes, speak the truth as they see the truth. I mean, Liz, if our politicians cannot speak out because they're fearful they might give offence to one community or another, we may as well close down the whole political process.
Well, exactly, Nigel. I mean, I was born in the 50s, and I can't get to grips with this. You've got to be careful what you say. I mean, my father was in the war, obviously, and he said to me as I was growing up, "You're one of the luckiest people in the world. You live in a free country where you can say what you want without fear of someone knocking on the door."
Yeah. Do you know something
anymore, is it?
Do you know something,
It's
Liz?
Scary.
My observation, as I was growing up, of much older relatives, or even when I was a young man, of people of the wartime generation in pubs meeting each other, was they would argue against each other like billy-o. But the next day, it was all forgotten, because one of the reasons they'd been in the war, that generation had lived through it, was that so we could have that free debate. What I now see, Liz, I see too many people who don't just disagree with someone's point of view, they actually hate that person, vilify that person for having that opinion. So, Liz, I'm with you. I think we're headed in the wrong place. Do you think, Liz, if Boris survives all this, he could still become party leader?
Oh, I do hope so.
You do hope so?
I really do hope so. Yes, I do.
Okay.
I really do hope so.
Couldn't be clearer.
Then I think I'll start to believe that there is a chance. There is a chance for us.
OK, Liz, thank you very much indeed. And Liz there, a strong Boris supporter. Force Boris out and the Tory party will open the door to Labour under Tom Watson, is the theory I get here on SMS. Nigel, this move to discipline Johnson by the party chairman will do nothing other than deepen divisions between the membership and the leadership. I agree with that. Lewis needs to drop this now, or he'll find the membership revolting against central office. It also demonstrates how worried the Conservative left Remainers are at Johnson's positioning on the leadership, says Mark from East Sussex. Mark, I do get those points. Tell you what also interests me. Brandon Lewis represents Great Yarmouth. I've got a challenge for you, Mr. Lewis. This Saturday, go out into the shopping high street in Great Yarmouth, talk to your constituents, ask them whether they think Boris is racist. Ask them whether they think the burqa should be banned or not. I think, Mr. Lewis, you'd be in for quite a shock. And if you're up for the challenge, I'll come with you to witness it. Let's go to Phil in Hastings, a new caller to this show. Phil, good evening.
Hello.
Hello there. So what do you make of Boris? Is he in trouble?
Yeah, he's bang in trouble with the Conservative Party.
So where does he go?
Oh, I think he'll go to the UKIP.
Oh, do you?
Yes, and he would make a brilliant leader for UKIP, and I think he would actually win the election.
That's
going on Brexit ground.
So Boris takes over UKIP. UKIP is not just the Brexit party, but it's got a big national figure running it, and it wins the election.
Precisely.
Do you really believe that, Phil?
I could see it happening, but whether it'll happen or not, I don't know.
But do you think, would Boris, whatever your image of UKIP is, Phil, would Boris fit the UKIP mould?
Yeah.
OK, or maybe the UKIP mould would fit Boris. Phil, fascinating, thank you. What do you think, folks? Phil thinks that Boris could take over the leadership of UKIP. Would Boris be at home leading UKIP? Please text and tweet. Give me your opinions on that. Call me on 0345 6060 973, because it could be, maybe one or two of the people who've called me tonight are right. Maybe he is in real trouble. Catherine is a new caller from Exeter. Good evening, Catherine.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, things are not looking very pretty for Boris. Is this the right direction of travel for the Tory party?
Unfortunately, I think the Tory party are moving further left. Because the Labour Party have moved left, they're heading more to a centrist point.
Right.
Poor old Boris and Jacob haven't had the memo. They've been left behind in Conservative waters with nobody to back them up.
Although, Catherine, Boris has never been particularly right-wing, has he?
No, but compared to what the Conservative Party is now, he is.
So where would you put the Conservatives on the spectrum? You're saying they're now bang in the middle, yeah?
Yeah, I would. They're very liberal now. They're not sort of standing up for the sort of views of those leaning to the right.
Do you lean to the right, Catherine?
Yes. Well, I did.
So,
But there's nowhere for me to go now, so...
so you feel disenfranchised by Mrs May's Conservative Party?
Unfortunately, yes.
So you're hoping and praying that Boris survives and becomes leader from the sounds of it?
Oh, I think, to be honest, it's going to take a new party, because pretty much Theresa May is doing to the Conservative Party what Tony Blair did to the Labour Party.
But the Labour Party held together.
They had to rebrand.
Yeah.
Now they've come back and they're even further left than we ever imagined they could be.
Right. So is it really possible that a new Conservative Party emerges a genuine Conservative Party emerges in British politics? And if it did, Catherine, would Boris be the man to lead it?
Boris could lead it. I'd rather not, to be honest, but I think it would be nice if maybe UKIP could take a little sidestep towards where the Conservatives were.
Uh-huh.
So, and maybe we could find room for him there.
So UKIP you see as a little bit too much to the right, do you?
Yeah, unfortunately I do.
Okay.
I have voted for UKIP, I will admit, but yes, a little bit too far right for me.
Well, if UKIP are too far right for you, and the Tories are too far left for you, sounds to me, Catherine, like there's a great big gap there, and maybe you're right. Maybe somebody will fill it. Fascinating. Great call. Thank you very much indeed. Nigel, Boris is the future of the Tory party. Without him, they are doomed, says Tony. Tony, if they suspend him, and he decides that this is just too humiliating, there are stacks of other things he could do in life. You know, he writes beautifully, he speaks well, he could go out and make an absolute fortune if he wanted to. I think you're right. I think without him, they would be in very, very real trouble. What does Linda from Birmingham, a new caller to this show, make of it? Hi, Linda.
Hello, Nigel. I'm just ringing up to say that as just an ordinary Joe blog, we are absolutely sick and tired of all of them. I think the time has come where all the appropriate MPs who really do mean what they say put their money where their conviction is and start a new party. Mr Macron did it in France. He didn't have a party when he stood, but he's got one now and he won the election. Mr Trump was an outsider and everyone said, oh, that would take too long, but he won. I can't tell you how disappointed and disillusioned ordinary people are.
I think
The right thing for Boris to do would actually resign. That would show real backbone. Resign and form a new party with yourself, Mr Mark Davis, and all the people who actually mean business, because ordinary voters are just being put off altogether because you can't trust any of them. And how can you lead a party when if you put anything forward, your own members are going to vote you down?
It is difficult. Whatever happens, Linda, in parties, I mean, any party will always have differing wings, any party will always have differing opinions. But I think your point and the previous point that Catherine made is a lot of voters just don't feel there's anywhere to go right at the moment.
And not only that, Nigel, you start a new party, just don't let the Hamiltons join.
Right, no, well, I do understand that. Believe you me. Linda, as a leaver that's crying out for something to happen, are you confident? Yeah. Are you confident under Mrs May that we're going to leave in end of March next year?
About as confident as I'd be under Jeremy Corbyn. Someone said the choice between them is like having a heart attack or having a stroke. There's not exactly a lot of options, really.
Linda, things will change because it can't go on the way that it is. We cannot go on with mass public disenchantment like this. Linda, thank you. Gary is a new caller from the Elephant and Castle. Hi, Gary.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, Boris could be, who knows, suspended, maybe even kicked out. I doubt kicked out, but he could be suspended. Have the Tory party got this right, Gary?
No, I think they've got it very wrong. I think they're in danger of becoming the Labour Party under Neil Kinnock, where every decision the leader makes just seems to further alienate the public and their own supporters. One other quick point as well, Nigel. I'm surprised nobody has beaten me to this. The Labour Party has an MP that has said far more outrageous things, considered to be racist by some and to be stupid by others. Diane Abbott, and there's barely a ripple of criticism, and yet Boris gets this horrendous furore when he says things. What a difference.
Well, Diane Abbott does get severe criticism, but very often when she does, we're told the critics are doing it because they're racist, which is a strange word. Gary, thank you. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC. It is now 7:32, and Boris Johnson faces a disciplinary panel. They could, if they find against him, finish up with the Conservative Party suspending him, or, in extremis, though I doubt it, kicking him out of the party. Wow. Would that be a good thing for the Conservative Party? What ought they to do in this situation? The other story that slightly struck me today is sterling has fallen today against the dollar below 129 for the first time in about 9 months. Now, you know, I've talked about this over the last few months, and my belief that sterling is going to go lower. We got back exactly to where we were on referendum day. Why is the pound now falling? Well, it's falling against the US dollar in particular because the US economy under Donald J. Trump is now growing at 4.1% per annum. Numbers we couldn't even dream of. The pound is falling because people are talking about a no-deal Brexit, which the markets fear would cause short-term dislocation. The pound is falling because of a fear of Jeremy Corbyn becoming the leader of this country, although since the anti-Semitism row, I think that factor has reduced. The real reason the pound is falling, because we have a government in crisis, and I think the markets know and anticipate that coming up this autumn, you know, there could be some really, really tough days for this government. Is it a bad thing that the pound's going down again? Well, if you're holidaying in America, or indeed if you're buying euros going to Spain, you're going to get fewer of them. That holiday is going to be more expensive. But there is a silver lining to this cloud, and it is that it makes our exports much more competitive. It makes our exports cheaper and worth thinking. Last year, our exports were nearly £340 billion, which is the highest they've ever been. So falling pound is not all bad news. Back to Boris. Jeremy in Tunbridge says the Tories will try to get rid of Boris so that he can't challenge May for the leadership, regardless of the fact that Boris could turn the Tories into an electable party. They'd rather shoot themselves in the foot, is Jeremy's view. Marilyn says, I recently read The Churchill Factor, written by Boris Johnson. He is intelligent, writes in a way that is easy to understand, and has a tongue-in-cheek humour, as with the burqa. It is the Remainers' way of causing trouble and trying to stop him from becoming PM. Marilyn, I read The Churchill Factor by Johnson, and you know what? I agree with you. Not only, is it a good book, but actually it's pretty easy to read. I read it on a flight to America. It's pretty easy to read. And look, nobody should doubt Boris's ability. His ability as a writer, as a speaker, as a personality. I like Boris. I sometimes politically find him very frustrating. I'm never quite sure what he really believes in sometimes. But I just think anybody in the modern day with Conservative colours who can become Mayor of London must have just a little bit of electoral gold dust. That's my feeling on it. Right, Boris needs to lead it back to being Conservative, says Matthew. Well, you're not the first person, Matthew, to suggest that so far this evening. Let's go to Mark in Ipswich. Good evening, Mark.
Hello, Jeremy. How are you?
Hello. Sorry? I said,
hello, Jeremy. How are you?
So why am I Jeremy? I'm missing the joke here, Mark.
No, it's okay. Nigel.
Look, that one went over my head. But hey, Mark, what do the Tories do next? What does Boris do next?
Nigel, honestly, I think this British government is, well, a total waste of space. Labour Party, they're total waste of space. Let me just tell you a little story, Nigel.
Go on.
When we was in the first Gulf War, we were told not to look at any women or make eye contact with any women wearing a burqa.
Okay.
We had to respect that law as British soldiers. That's what we did.
Okay.
And, back over here, what's happening at the minute, we're losing freedom of speech and what Boris said, our sense of humour now, because I think it's just what Boris said was, just his sense of humour.
So Mark, some people are saying that he was trying to incite hatred.
No, it's just his sense of humour. You know, the British people, we're losing everything. You know, our whole identity, I think, in this country. I mean, outside of London, you know, London is cut off from the rest of the country, from the north, Scotland. People don't see what's going on up there. There are communities up there where, you know, they're no-go areas to white people.
Well, Mark, this is an accusation that is made. Whenever it is, the press go mad and say that it's not true. But regardless of no-go areas, what is true is there's increased division within society. Of that, there's no doubt. So, look, what does Boris... You like his sense of humour. Do you think he's going to survive this kangaroo court?
Yes, definitely.
You think he will?
I think because the British people, the majority of the British people are behind him.
Well,
you know, he's not
on this issue.
Islamophobian. He's just got a sense of humour.
OK, Mark, thank you very much indeed. And Mark says it's just Boris. It's Boris being Boris. It's Boris being tongue-in-cheek. He's not trying to incite hatred. What does Aisha, a new caller from the north, from Bradford, think? Good evening, Aisha.
Hi, good evening, Nigel.
Welcome. So, what do you make? What do you make of the whole Boris burqa saga?
I think it's absolutely farcical, to be honest with you. I cannot understand why so much airtime is being given to a comment that Boris has made. I was born into the Muslim faith. I'm of Pakistani heritage, and I can honestly say that many Muslim women, they wear the burqa because it's compulsory. It's not actually a choice. When the only choice is, in that religion, that you have to dress in a certain way, what other choice do you have? Now, the women that are speaking up pro-niqab, the Muslim women that are speaking up, maybe they're the ones that have the choice, but what about the ones that are being oppressed? What about the ones that are being forced by their families?
Aisha, they say it's bringing them closer to God. That's what they say.
Well, I disagree with that, because the reality of that's just a smokescreen. The reality of that is, because I come from that community, many, many women are forced to wear the burqa. They have no choice but to wear that burqa. And they may not have a close affiliation to God, but they have a close affiliation to their community and to their families.
So what, Aisha? I mean, we live in a 21st century country where we constantly talk about equality within our society. If you're right, and I'm almost certain you are right, that there are women being forced to wear the burqa, what do you think we as a country should try and do about it?
I think the first thing that we need to do is stick to what is British and allow freedom of speech to run its course. I couldn't agree more. When we are cowering to these communities and that are eroding our freedom of speech, we are allowing we're actually allowing and encouraging domestic abuse of these women. We are actually fueling domestic abuse. And, I mean, the other thing, let's be clear, the burqa, it's a piece of clothing which is attributed to a religious ideology, and it's got nothing to do with one's ethnicity. So how can it be conceded as racism by speaking out against it? Boris, I don't believe he's a racist. You know, I think he's quite funny, to be honest with you. You know, he's made these comments and he's simply stated a rather obvious observation, which 60% of the British public agree with.
And you're one of them, Aisha. And you're one of them, Aisha.
One of them, absolutely. I think he's being witch hunted. You know, and I think the topic really has taken more airtime than it needs to. You know. Apparently, you know, we live in a free democratic society where freedom of speech is supposed to be celebrated.
Well,
but, you know, I would say that this country is becoming more and more dictatorial. You know, we have a two-tier system, which cowers to people of a certain faith, and they're being given special privileges and treated with sensitive kid gloves just in case they're hurt or upset by words.
Aisha, I want to say this to you. I absolutely 100% endorse the words and the passion that you've expressed in those sentiments. And I've got one piece of advice for you, Aisha. I don't know what your job is. Tell me, what is it?
I'm a property manager.
Right, well, you better get into politics, all right? Because you've got it, you understand it, and you're brave. We need people like you in public life, and if we get people like you, it'll be a better country. Aisha, thank you for the call. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's now 7:45. Not for the first time, Boris Johnson in hot water, but this time he's actually going to be investigated by a panel, and he could finish up being suspended from the Tory party for the comments he made earlier this week. And they're all piling in. Dominic Grieve, the former Attorney General, would leave the Conservative Party if Boris became leader, and Cressida Dick saying, I know that many people have found this offensive. What the hell's it got to do with you? Your job's to enforce the law, not tell us what you think. And I'm pleased that Richard in Bishop Stortford rather agrees with this by SMS. He says Cressida Dick should stay out of politics. Hear, hear, and remain neutral. Agreed. This is now turning into a witch hunt and a hate campaign against Boris. Richard, I agree with you completely. The UKIP point was made earlier, and Mark on Twitter says, if Boris Johnson went to UKIP, the Tory party would be destroyed. Do you know what, Mark? I think there's some truth in that. I think they are actually in danger of significantly splitting. And not over this row so much, but over what the behaviour of the Central Party tells you about where conservatism in this country is going. You know, we had a caller from Exeter earlier making the point that Labour have moved to the left and the Tories have moved into the centre. That is absolutely right. But ultimately, this will be about Brexit. And if we get in the autumn something that is seen to be even more of a sellout than Chequers, and that is, given this leader, very, very possible, then they are going to be incredibly vulnerable. At the moment, they're just lucky that Corbyn's Labour Party is embroiled in this anti-Semitism row. Lynn says, Boris is my MP and he has my support. Patricia goes further. Boris would make a wonderful Prime Minister, a no-nonsense man who would look after our wonderful country. Kevin is calling from Slough. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Nigel.
So, what is going on? Is Boris going to come out of this okay?
I don't know. I think the Brexiters have completely miscalculated what's been going on. I think they should have acted a long time ago. And like David Davis said in his resignation letter about incidents where May has actually prevented a strategy that the Brexiters wanted to pursue.
He did. Yep.
I don't understand what they've been doing, and I don't understand why Johnson is obviously manoeuvring and testing the waters. But he's left it so late, and I don't understand why. Why were they not? Why did they not get the 45, 46 signatures?
48 signatures. Kevin, I don't know the answer to that. The other question for me, Kevin, is Boris had that resignation speech, didn't he? He gave it in the House of Commons. Surely that was the moment to say, wasn't it, that under this Prime Minister we will not get the Brexit that we voted for, and I put myself forward. Why didn't he do it, Kevin?
I am mystified. I am mystified by that. I'm mystified by David Davis saying a couple of days after he resigned that Theresa May's a good Prime Minister when she palpably isn't.
Yeah, but the party, Kevin. Remember, the party. Party loyalty matters more. Forget the country. It's the party that matters. Do you know, Kevin, I watched all of this, and I went through exactly the same thought processes you're going through now, back in 1993, at the time of Maastricht, and when I concluded that our politicians would rather put the interests of their political parties before anything else, that was why I got involved in UKIP.
Well, I was going to mention this about Maastricht because this has basically been going on since Heseltine deposed Thatcher. Thatcher, I think, would have stood up against Maastricht. She was repositioning herself.
Without a doubt, yeah.
And Heseltine deposed her. May and Cameron and Major are all the descendants of Heseltine. Major refused to have a referendum on Maastricht, and that has basically caused a schism in the Tory party, and it's caused a schism in the country. And I just don't know. I don't know how. There needs to be a realignment on the right, as you're correctly saying. I can't see Johnson defecting to UKIP, while I'm not making any comment about Tommy Robinson, I've got my own views, but I cannot see him defecting to UKIP while Gerard Batten is flirting with Tommy Robinson.
And this was the comment made earlier by somebody that she felt UKIP had gone a bit too far to the right.
Well, Look, to be honest, I think a lot of what Tommy Robinson says and does, I can understand where he's coming from. But there is also selling a political message and a mass political message, and I can see that kind of, him being associated with that kind of thing is not brilliant. It's a bit like, well, it's not exactly like Corbyn on the other side, but it's getting along those lines. But one of your earlier callers said, I'm politically homeless. I cannot stand what has happened to the Tories. Cameron, I mean, basically we've had Blair government since 1997. That's what's happened. The Tories have completely gone over to the Blairite side.
Well, Kevin, the one thing for certain, and you're articulating this very well, there is a gap. There is a vacuum, and nature always fills a vacuum. Kevin, I thank you very much indeed. Susan in Maidenhead's having a go at me. She says, I hope you're not being disingenuous here and not courting calls to nurture a Boris Johnson leadership for a new style UKIP. If you are, please have the courage to say so. Susan, I'm not doing it. Caller after caller is doing it. People are speculating whether Boris might go to UKIP. People are saying he can't go to UKIP because UKIP's now too far to the right. People are saying the Conservative Party has filled the centre ground as Corbyn has taken Labour to the left. I tell you what, Susan, there is a great big vacuum out there. I don't know what ultimately is going to fill it, but I tell you this, Susan, something is. That's my view. Nick is calling from Cambridge. Nick, hi there. So, is Bojo going to get suspended?
Of course he won't. He won't leave the Conservative Party because he is a quintessential, if that's the right word, Tory. Just like Cameron won't leave the Conservative Party. They were all earmarked, all these individuals, Cameron, Boris Johnson, Rees-Mogg, no doubt, they were all earmarked from birth to be high politicians within the British establishment. And to ask them to leave the Conservative Party, to think that they would leave a Conservative Party, is like asking you to go and join a revolutionary communist party. They won't leave. And Nigel, I know you're making this, you're saying it is escalating and all that, your introduction.
Well, it is actually, isn't it?
It's only escalating within your own populist little playground. Nothing else.
Well, look. I promise you, I did not force Cressida Dick to go out and make the comments that she did. I didn't force 100 British Muslim women to write a letter demanding that he be booted out. I didn't in any way have any influence over the establishment of an independent panel who will examine what he's done and decide whether to recommend disciplinary action. I tell you what, Nick, it is escalating.
All these callers that you're coming in praising him, Boris Johnson, everything, they wouldn't have given two hoots about the burqa 3 days ago. It's only when the article was written and it was blown up by the press and the mass media.
Well, actually, Nick,
it's been non-stop. Nothing would have been said.
Do you know, since
he's done this deliberately, just to avoid the real issues like trade wars and the Brexit talks failing. It's all a diversion from everything else.
Well, Nick, let me tell you, I've had plenty of callers this week who disagree with Boris. Plenty of callers who think he has got this wrong and has been offensive. But I will say a vast majority of people on this issue are on Boris's side. And that, Nick, is very much backed up by that remarkable Sky Data poll yesterday, showing 60% of the country have an opinion on this that is much stronger than Boris's. They want the burqa ban, Nick.
Well, little things please little minds. If they haven't got anything more prominent to worry about in politics.
All right. Well, some people care about a lot. Nick, I thank you. I've got time for one last quick call. Richard from Manningtree, time is tight.
Good evening, Nigel.
Good evening.
Interesting calls. The last gentleman caller, not the one last, but the one before him, and the lady.
Yep.
Cheered me up no end, actually, with their comments.
OK, go on.
And anyway, yes. Why is all this fuss being made over Boris's comments when just a few years ago Emily Thornberry and Ken Clarke said similar?
Yes.
Did didn't they? You know the remarks.
I do. Emily Thornberry said she wouldn't let her 4-year-old be looked after by a woman with a burqa, and Ken Clark described the burqa as a sort of very odd garment or something like that. And Sadiq Khan, of course, also, Richard, and I read this out last night, said when he was a kid he didn't see burqas, he wondered what was going on to make it happen. Richard, I'm sorry, we're out of time. I'm going to finish, though, with a tweet from Stephen that says a lot about this country today, beyond, I think, just the Boris burqa row. He says, I too am politically homeless. I have lost the will to vote. There's a lot of you out there feeling like that. I'll be back here Sunday morning at 10 a.m. At 10 tonight, it's Ian Collins, but up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you very much.